Hey everybody, thank you for checking in once again, and today we're going to have a look at some cameras from the 1930s. So 1930s cameras, right? Well, I guess in the 30s, which is now 90 years ago, photography was a relatively new technology, and the 30s was an era where it began to spread. We had 35mm film established, 120mm film was established, so two types of film that we still use today were established at that time. And photography was kind of widening out. It was moving away from the sort of era of, great big glass plate cameras that you had to put a sort of a hood over your head and prepare the plate with chemicals and put in the glass plate. And it was all a very big, heavy and expensive business. The 1930s, the 20s as well, but certainly the 30s, saw a big expansion in what was then small format photography, so 35mm, 120mm. So let's have a look at some of the cameras. Okay, the first camera I have to show you today is in a box, and this is its original postage box, incredibly enough. And it was delivered to this gentleman, Mr. Stringer, Mr. G. Stringer of 13 Victoria Road, Barkingside, Ilford. And look what it says on here. If undelivered, please return to Titbits Camera Presentation Department, 22 Tavistock Street, Covent Garden, London. So if this camera doesn't work, I'm going to take it straight back to them, and I shall jolly well want to know why. So here we are. Let's take it out of the box. Let's see what we've got inside. And immediately we can see what kind of camera it is. This is the Coronet Special number 2 box camera, and there's the instruction manual, and we can see that it's a camera from 1934, although these types of cameras were made from about 1900. We'll go on into that shortly. And here it is. Here's the Coronet number 2, and this is an extraordinary little camera. It's sometimes said that a camera is simply a light type box with a lens at one end and some film or some type of receiver or sensor at the other end, and this is the very definition of that definition, if you like. This exactly fulfills that definition. It's so simple. It's made out of cardboard. These were all made out of cardboard, though this might be a metal one. Some of the Kodak ones were cardboard. This is a copy, essentially, of the Kodak Brownie cameras, which established 120 film for use, and that's a film size that we can still find and use today. That's still the the medium format film size is 120. So these were originally copied from Kodak Brownie, box Brownie cameras, and that was an incredible piece of marketing for Kodak. Brownie was actually a cartoon character, and the original Brownie cameras, I was very surprised to find, were originally targeted at children, at the children's market, and that's why this camera is so very, very simple. But they sold really well. Adults use them as well. And so pretty soon it was decided that they needed to be sold to adults as well as children, and adults became the target market. But that's an incredible start. So they're essentially a copy of the Brownie camera, and they're really, 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 really simple. Now, I was going to say almost everybody. That isn't true. But many, many, many people had cameras of this kind in the 1930s. They weren't particularly expensive to buy. They were always sold cheaply. They were really conceived by George Eastman of the Kodak company, who was a brilliant, you know, business guy. They were really conceived as a way to sell film, and they succeeded brilliantly at that. There were many, many, many thousands of these in use in the USA, in the UK, in Europe, right across the world, and they were extremely successful cameras. And they led to the point and shoots of today, really. A point and shoot of today is no different to a camera like this, apart from its shape and its film size. It's got a very simple meniscus lens, and I think the focal length is written on there. No, it's not, but it's probably about 100mm or something like that. A meniscus lens has a convex face and a concave rear side, and they give beautiful, dreamy images that tend to be pretty sharp in the middle, but to fade away, sharpness falls away very quickly at the edges and especially in the corners. So you end up with really dreamy images. You've got to shoot these in good light. You can still shoot them. You have to shoot them in good light because the apertures are very small, I think around f11, maybe even f20, something like that. And the available shutter speeds are slow. I think this one shoots at 1/40th of a second. Most of these wouldn't shoot any closer than 6 feet, but this clearly is a luxury model. It's got a special close-up lens, so here we've got, if you can see this here, it says 8 feet and over. And then if we slide this, I don't know if you can see inside the lens there, you should be able to see some movement when I move this lever, and an extra element slides across, and we're then in the 3 feet only position. So that's portraits. If you want to take pictures of people, that's your position for taking people. And that's the only focusing we've got on this camera. That's all there is. It's either 8 feet and over or 3 feet. So we've obviously got a very tiny aperture in there to enable that. These cameras do need good light, but they give very, very deep depth of field. So, you know, you'll get pretty much everything in focus, right from near to far, when you're using one of these. The viewfinders, well, here are the windows for the viewfinders, these two. Here's the main finder on top, so you look down onto that. It's a horizontal thing, one that you look down onto, and that's the portrait orientation. Then if you want to shoot landscape, you turn your camera around and you use this finder here to look down. So two finders, two very simple optical finders. If we open it up, well, there's not a lot to see. Let's fire the shutter, there it goes. Nice and simple, and it works both ways. That's a shot and that's a shot as well, I'm given to understand. I've not actually shot this camera, but I believe that's how they work. To open it up, there's a catch on the top there, so we'll move that out of the way. And then there's one on this side that we can move out of the way. And then we also have to pull out the winder on this camera. This is the winder. It's a bit tricky to do. This camera has obviously seen very little use over the years. It's now 90 years old, very nearly, and it still looks pretty much in new condition to me. It's got very, very little damage on it. These cameras are as simple as it gets. That's an optional gate, and you can take that off if you want to, which we'll do now. And that gives you a bigger shot. So it's written on the front actually. So the way we have it at the moment gives you 3¼ by 2¼ inches, or we can do 2¼ by 1 5/8, and that's when we put on this extra gate here. And I guess that is going to save us some film because the images are going to be smaller. They'll still be big enough to contact print though. If you like to contact print, You can get a print direct from a negative without really any need for too much enlargement anyway. The take-up spool goes here, I think. Anyway, the spools go on top. Look, there's one spool there, and the film goes around here. Here's rollers onto there. So it's quite a long-winded mechanism, and a very mechanical mechanism as well. It's got a real feel of early 20th century mechanism about it, which I kind of like. If you want one of these cameras today, some people do shoot them. They give these beautiful dreamy images, as I say, and quite a lot of people still shoot these and enjoy them. If you want one of these cameras, you shouldn't be paying any more than, certainly more than £30. They're old, yes, but there were so many made that they're not rare, they're not particularly complex, and they are what they always were, a very, very cheap way of making images. So certainly don't pay more than £30. Really, I'd be thinking, if I was wanting to buy one of these, I'd be thinking more in terms of £10, maybe £15 at most. But very available and a lot of fun to shoot. This is the kind of camera that your grandparents or great-grandparents would have been using in the 1930s, and they recorded lots and lots of ordinary life from the 1930s in the 20th century, the first century to be fully photographed and recorded. Now, if you were well-heeled in the 1930s and you wanted to do some photography, you may well have bought yourself one of these, or indeed one of these. And these are Leicas. These are the beautiful little Barnack Leicas, which we've talked about before on this show, but I'll just give you a very brief overview of them. This is the 1932 Leica 2, and I do love this camera. It's been through lots and lots of episodes and stories. It's lost most of its paint somewhere along the way. It's lost its nice white filled in lettering, and even the lettering itself is wearing down. But this is a very early camera. It's quite interesting. It's got a serial number of 94886. So this is a very early Leica 2, I think one of the first, and you can tell the early cameras because they have this little brass plug in the back, and that's where the film register was adjusted on, I think, even earlier cameras than this. They were using up spare bodies from the early days. But anyway, this is the Leica 2, and it's a Leica, so, you know, they're an expensive brand today, and they were an expensive brand in the 30s. This is a much different camera to the box camera. It uses 35mm film. It's far, far more solid. It's made of metal, and it's adjustable, importantly. It's got a range of shutter speeds from 1/500th to 1/20th, and B, that's the Z, German for Zeit or time setting, so that's the bulb setting. It's a lovely little simple thing to use. It's got a lens on it, which, this is not the original lens, but it does look like it. This is an Industar 22. What you would have had originally would have been an Elmar, but it would have been a 50mm f3.5, just the same as this, and they're actually quite similar lenses in operation, at least, if not in construction. So we've got a variable focus, we've got variable aperture, and we've got variable shutter speeds. And importantly, we've got inside this little mechanism under here, we've got a rangefinder, which at the time was known as automatic focusing. And it's it's a fantastic little device and real high tech for the time. You just turn the focusing lever and look through this first window here, and you'll see a split image as in all rangefinder cameras, and when that split image comes together, then you're focused and you move your eye to this window, which is the actual viewfinder where you frame and compose your shot. So they're not combined. The viewfinder and the rangefinder windows are not combined as they were in later cameras, and Leica didn't do that until I think 1954 with the Leica M, so quite late. That makes them a little slower to use, but by the standards of the day, gosh, you know, they must have been very, very quick, nice, snacky little things to use indeed. And they're still really nice to use today. I like using these cameras because they're small, they're pocketable, and they're simple. So this is 32. Where are we? We've got another one from 1936 here. This is the Leica 3. We've got a similar range, in fact, exactly the same range of shutter speeds, but this one is wearing a later lens. This is a beautiful, beautiful lens. The genuine Leica lens, Summit R, 50mm f2. This was a gift from a very kind viewer, and I still have this lens today. I will never sell this lens. It's such a beauty. It gives lovely, lovely images. It's not quite the equal of later lenses, but it does make lovely images, and it's beautifully, beautifully engineered. It's just a stunning piece of engineering. Notice that in 36, still we've got the separate viewfinder and rangefinder windows, but we do have a diopter adjustment, or actually that's not a diopter adjustment. What that is adjustment for near and far. So when you're shooting near, I think you have it upwards, and when you're shooting down, you have it down. When you're shooting far, you have it downwards, just to focus the viewfinder, the rangefinder a little. I think that's how it is. If that's not, it's opposite. So that's an addition. The strap lugs are an addition. We've got nice strap lugs on here, and it's a nicer looking camera, and this one actually is really, really quiet, unlike the Leica 2, which does need a bit of a lube. This one is beautifully quiet, so a very, very nice camera. These cameras were copied by, you know, any and all manufacturers, all and sundry copied these cameras. They were copied by Russian manufacturers, they were copied by Chinese manufacturers, and that's before the patents had been released after the Second World War. After the Second World War, the patents for the Leica cameras were just made, you know, open to anybody. Anybody who wanted to make that camera could make it, and there were loads of copies after the war, but there were even some before the war as well. Here's a Russian one. This is a post-war. This is a Zorki. There were also Ukrainian Fed cameras made in this exact same style and same model. It's you know, almost exactly the same thing, just not quite as nicely finished, but you know, for all intents and purposes, it's the same camera as that Leica 2. So there's loads and loads and loads and loads of copies. A good Leica with a lens will cost you £300–400. A good Zorki with a lens will cost you between £50 to £120 thereabouts. Very, very nice little cameras. I still like using them today, and I still take them out when I can to do a bit of shooting because they're lovely to use. However, they did have a rival, and that was in the form of the Contax cameras, the Contax 1 and 2 models. Now, I don't have a Contax 2, but I do have an exact copy of a Contax 2. And that is this, the Kiev 4A. This is an exact copy of the 30s Contax 2, developed over the years. This is a 76 version. Very quiet shutter. Listen to that. Oh, really quiet shutter. So this is 1976. We've got the long base rangefinder on this camera. So we've got a much longer distance between the rangefinder window, which is here, and the viewfinder window, which is here. So that gives us, in theory, more accuracy than the Leica rangefinder distance, which, as you will note, the distance between those two round windows is much smaller than it is on the Contax copy, the Kiev camera. Now, shall I call it a Contax or a Kiev? All right, we're talking about 30s cameras. It's Contax design. I'm going to call it a Contax. And it had a combined viewfinder and rangefinder, and that is really important in my view. It makes things much easier, much more convenient, and much simpler as well. That's a real advance. However, I don't find these cameras as easy to use. These were the cameras that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Frank Capra used for a lot of his wartime images, and it focuses using this control here. It's got a lock on it at infinity, so it locks rather at infinity there, and it won't move until you release the lock by this little control here, and then you can focus with it there. There is a certain grip required, the Contax Kiev grip, which is this grip. If you use this finger, you're liable to block that window, so the rangefinder won't work at all. So that is the correct way to use a Contax Kiev camera. And these are exact copies of those old Contaxes. They're very beautiful machines. I do have an even earlier one here. This is a 1955 Kiev, I've written it on my hand, Kiev 3, this one. And this is a very, very beautiful thing. It's a little ungainly because it's got this big light meter on top. This is a 1955 version. I think I just said that, didn't I? Well, I've said it twice. So it's generally that bit more nicely made than the later one. These later ones, there's a story that in the factory, these later Kiev cameras, thousands and thousands of them were dumped and scrapped when officials came to inspect the factory because they were just considered, you know, not made to the correct standard. But, you know, I've never had any problems with this 76 one. It's a beautiful machine and it works fine. The 1955 one, which may in fact have some Zeiss parts in it, because there were some Zeiss parts, I believe, in use in these Ukrainian Kiev cameras. Same very silent shutter. Beautiful, beautiful silent shutter. And the light meter on this one actually still works. It's incredible, really, that it should. And it's incredible also that I can't remember how to open it, but I don't, unless it's this. Yes, it is. And that light meter still works. I don't know if it's very accurate, but it certainly responds to light. I don't know if I can actually show it you responding to light, but it does respond to light, and that's quite amazing. So this Kiev, what is it, Kiev 3, this is a copy of the Contax again. A little more ungainly, but essentially the same camera. Sadly, this one does not have its original lens. This is a 1974 lens, but there we are, you can't have everything. The camera itself just feels that little bit nicer. They're bigger than the Leicas, right? The Contaxes / Kievs were bigger than the Leicas, even the small one. Let me show you the small one by comparison. So I think they're a little wider. Yeah, they are a little wider. And they're also quite a lot taller. So it's a bigger camera. It's not heavier, surprisingly. These little Leicas are very heavy little cameras. This one is not any more heavy than the Leica. Beautiful little things. They've got a wider range of shutter speeds, so we've gone up to 1,000th on this one, and on the older one, the 55 one, that goes up to 1/1250th of a second. So that's pretty cool. These were favoured by, as I understand it, professional photographers in the former Soviet Union. They preferred them over the Zorki, Fed sort of Leica-derived cameras, and these were considered far nicer cameras. And in fact, when they were on sale in the UK in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, when I was looking at them, they were that bit more expensive. As I recall, this is going back a bit now, but I think in 1978 the Zorki 4K sold for around £20 in Dixon's. This, I recall, sold for about £25, I think. It was always that bit more expensive, and it was considered, you know, the best of the what were at that time Soviet cameras. And it is a beautiful, beautiful machine. I don't use them very much because they're quite large. You need this special technique to use the rangefinder properly, and also they're tricky to change lenses on. This is a bayonet lens mount, and the focusing mechanism is actually inside the camera body, so you'll see the whole lens is turning there. Now that's interesting engineering, but it does make for a complex lens mount, and when you want to change lenses it can be a little bit tricky. So I tend to just leave that one on there and just not worry about it. If you want to buy an original Contax too, supposing you can find one in good enough condition to shoot, then I think you're into thousands. They're very, very, very highly collectible. Now, if you want a Ukrainian copy, then you shouldn't pay more than £100 or so, and probably nearer to £50 or even less if you're patient. I paid £50 for this one because it was an early one and I thought it was worth it. I was interested in having an early one of these in the collection because I do like them, and I used to admire them when I was a kid trying to get into photography. So they're available, or at least copies are available, and they're still shootable and usable. They're a very, very high quality camera. They'll generally be reliable, and they're a very interesting camera to take out on the street with you as well. They tend to get quite a few comments if you know, if you're sort of interested in talking to other photographers about your kit. So there we are. That's the Contax camera / Kiev copy, available in the 1930s if you were very well heeled indeed. Finally, another popular camera. Here's a lovely little bit of industrial design. This is the bullet camera, and this camera was designed, look at that 1930s Art Deco style. It was designed by a very well-known designer of the time, whose name I forget, but I'll put up on screen there for you. And he designed lots of other things, also lots of other iconic sorts of items of the time. And this is one of those iconic sorts of items. There will have been many, many, many people have used and enjoyed one of these little bullet cameras. Why they were called bullet cameras, I don't know. It must have sounded cool at the time. Maybe it was to imply a suggestion of speed. You know, these cameras are very quick to use, fast as a bullet, fast as a speeding bullet. They were on sale in the USA. That's why I'm doing a bad US accent. I apologise to viewers in the USA. Only on sale in the USA. The lens screws out, as you just saw. So when it's stored in this position, this camera goes really easily into a pocket or a bag. Out comes the lens to shoot, and it's a simple matter of pushing this button. here, and the shutter will fire. Nice and simple. There's a control on here to pull this control out, and that will, I think, vary the speed of the shutter, although it does sound the same. That may be an aperture control. I think this camera fires at 1/40th of a second. It's a really, really simple camera. It has a very simple finder. You just unfold it. It's a frame finder. So you just look through this part here, and you can see your image actually fairly clearly. That does give you a pretty good idea of what you're going to see in your shot, and it may well be at least as accurate as some of the other finders of the time. So I don't think there's any problems with that. It opens up, there's a red window on the back so you can see the number of the picture. It's important to look for the numbers as you're winding. It opens up by this control here, which slides upwards, and then the whole back will just, it's not hinged, it's actually completely detachable. And inside here, what have we got? Bullet camera. There we are, have a look at that. Bullet camera, Verichrome V127, Super XX Pan, XX127, and all the various film types. So this is a 127 camera. That's the back, and inside we can see the very simple inner bits to this camera. Can we see those? Let's wind the shutter in so you can see the gate more clearly. There's the gate. So it gives a landscape image, and for portrait, just turn it around that way. So a very, very simple thing. Here's the take-up spool, still ready in place there. That's good to see, because if I did ever want to shoot this camera, I've never actually shot it, but if I did ever want to shoot it, I would need this take-up spool. Again, we've got a very simple meniscus lens going on in there. Very, very simple thing. Convex on the outside and concave on the inside, and it'll give similar results to the box brownies and the Coronets and the Agfa box cameras and all the rest of these very, very simple consumer cameras of the day. Nevertheless, simple or not, these were the cameras that took the important images for people in their everyday lives. And as we look back in time at the record of images that we've got, so many, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them were taken on cameras like these. So these were very, very important cameras indeed for recording the 20th century, for history, and for the people who used them. Again, it'll make you dreamy images. If you want to use a camera like this today, you can buy one for no more than 20, 30 pounds, I would have thought, probably less if you know, if you're patient and you're persistent. Around about 20 to 30 pounds would be a ballpark figure. Again, this meniscus lens will make very dreamy images. Technically, the images won't be very good, but from an aesthetic, artistic point of view, they will be beautiful, sharp in the center, usually pretty sharp in the center, and pretty soft in the corners and at the edges. A great little camera to use, a curiosity nowadays, but an interesting camera to use if you want to shoot an old 30s camera. So there we are, 4 cameras from the 1930s, 2 of them popular, 2 of them angled more towards the professional or rather well-heeled domestic market, but all of them have done a massive role, played a massive role in recording the 20th century. One of the most important centuries to have happened, a century where there was a great great explosion of technology, great social change, and the first century really to have been fully recorded. And it's cameras like this one and this one that are responsible for doing it. So thank you to these simple old cameras. Thank you to the people who made them, who bought them, and to the people who kept them for all these years so that we can see them today. Very, very nice old machines, and I've really enjoyed this trip. Whoops, not one over. I've really enjoyed this trip back in time today. So that's about it for today. Thank you very, very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And thank you to subscribers. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for that. Thank you also to patrons for your support. That's very, very much appreciated. And without that support, we couldn't make the show in the form that we make it. So many, many thanks for that. If you would like to support this channel, you can do that over at www.patreon.com/Zenography, and you can do that for as little as $1 per month. But as for now, that's it from me. So again, thank you very much for watching. And if you're not doing anything too demanding next week around this time, please do join me for a spot more Zenography. Cheerio all.